All right, welcome back, Chelsea fans, to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. I, of course, am your host, Nick, and I'm joined by Matt Law for a Matt Law special. We had tech issues in recording this morning. We're on our third go. I forgot to press record on one of them. Let's just loosen this up a little bit. Why don't we? If you're
Chelsea
watching,
were rusty. Chelsea were
yeah,
rusty, and so are we. We're
for
allowed to be. It's the start of the season.
first special of the new season. We're back in a big way. Matt, how was your small holiday before you took on the entire of the Premier League season, the Champions League, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah. Well, given this is my third time explaining my holiday, it feels like a very long time ago now. But no, I had a nice short break just before the season started. I was back in time for the first game, so I feel nice and in the swing of things. It was one of those breaks where I couldn't properly switch off. I had to do a little bit of work while I was away. I had to keep on top of things so that I didn't come in feeling sort of in the cold. But yeah, good. And I'm very ready for the season and very ready for this to be our most successful take of the day.
God willing, we're on the right one now. So, look, as we said two previous other times, if you're watching on YouTube and you're like, hey, I've never seen Nick wear sunglasses before, I got a gnarly eye thing going on, so I thought I'd spare everyone the sight of me for the most part. But we are going to talk in segment one here about the start of the season. Chelsea played Crystal Palace on Sunday, 0-0 draw. Not a whole lot in it, candidly. Chelsea struggled to kind of get out of the starting blocks. I think kind of came into the game later on after a few subs were made. But Matt, you were there. You were kind of taking it all in for the first match of the season. It always does feel like there's some anticipation to it, especially this year for Chelsea. What did you take out of the match, and what impressed you the most, and what are you most concerned about after the first match?
So Chelsea were what I expected in that rusty. Looked like there could be an argument that there was some fatigue there. Enzo Fernandez, particularly Cole Palmer. I thought both of those guys, who at the second half of last season were so crucial to Chelsea, just couldn't quite get going as you'd like them to. But I'm going to give them a pass on that, given that they've had barely any pre-season, the amount of games they've played. So it's kind of as I expected. Crystal Palace had played the Community Shield, which is a semi-competitive game. Certainly, a lot more competitive than Chelsea had in any of their couple of pre-season matches. So Palace were further along fitness and preparation-wise. You could tell that they were physical, they were difficult, they're fast on the break. So I always expected it to be a tough game. It's just that in terms of what I liked about the performance, I thought Josh Achapong did really well. Came in and there was one fantastic tackle, either on Mateta or Sarr. I can't remember which one of them off the top of my head, but one absolutely brilliant tackle. And I thought he looked assured, steady, no nerves. I liked what I saw of him. In terms of things to just be wary of or semi-concerned about, I suppose the fact the attack didn't really click. I don't want to make too much of it on a one-game sample size, but
Sure.
goals are going to be a big thing for Chelsea this season, and you couldn't really make a case for any of the attackers having a great game. Cole was quiet. Jamie Gittins hasn't played in the Premier League before. I thought social media criticism of him was harsh, but having said that, he did struggle a little bit, and maybe there's a case there that it's going to take him a little bit of time just to get used to the Premier League. Neto was okay, but nothing brilliant. Pedro didn't really get any service. Esteval came on, very exciting, but he's raw, really raw, and I think people are going to have to be a little bit patient with that for all his talent. So, yeah, if there's any concern, it was just probably that the attack didn't quite click, and you can probably see why Chelsea is still trying to add to that. And just to add to that as well, I thought when you looked at the bench, yes, Esteval was on the bench, but he's an 18-year-old kid. You're never going to be quite sure what you get from him at this stage of his career. It could be absolute fireworks, or it could be very inconsistent. I looked at the bench and just thought, other than Delap, there wasn't a lot there that you thought, okay, they can go and make these subs to win a game or change a game, which again points to why they want a Garnacho, a Simmons, whether that knocks Gittins down to the bench or gives them further options in terms of what they do with Palmer. I just didn't think there was any way of really sort of enlivening the attack too much, other than just hope for the best with Esteval. So it was instructive in that way, I think.
We got a question from one of our Discord followers, James Lake, who said, "This is not Joao Pedro slander, but he's curious, given Crystal Palace's setup, why Delap didn't start. This is a team that can sit deep and hit you on the counter, and they're very physical. And he thought that that would translate really well for Liam Delap's game. When Delap comes on, the attack does look a little bit more lively. I think maybe there was an injection of pace from Esteval, and Cole Palmer got freed up a little bit. Are you surprised that there wasn't a different consideration there?"
I'm not surprised because I think João Pedro is slightly ahead of Liam Delap, or has been, in terms of what he's produced in the Club World Cup and over pre-season. And therefore, I expected João Pedro to start, I've got to be honest, regardless of opposition particularly. I just think maybe he's hit the ground running a little faster than Delap. That's not to say Delap started badly or anything like that, but Pedro has started really brightly in pre-season in the Club World Cup for Chelsea. And I think probably there was a thought there that he could maybe really hit the ground running. I get it stylistically with that low block and the physicality of the defenders. Maybe Delap is better suited to that battle, albeit if you want to get in behind them and want to try and run behind them, maybe Pedro's better. So it's a bit of a toss-up. I personally expected Pedro to play, and it's probably, if you'd asked me before the game who I'd have picked, I'd have probably said Pedro, just on the basis that he'd started a bit faster. So I can totally understand that. But I mean, the good thing is there is an option there now. Last season it was sort of Nicolas Jackson or nobody, and it's nice that there is another option of striker, whoever starts, and that's going to be really important for Chelsea.
Doc Water asked, with the current squad that Maresca has, what does he need to get his team to do to break down compact low blocks? He says we're going to face more of this style of low block, especially in the Premier League, than what PSG threw at us in the Club World Cup final, where they were super aggressive and pressed us super high.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think they will face a lot of low blocks. They probably won't face a lot of 3 to 5 man defences, but they will face a lot of low blocks. Traditionally, that's been what Chelsea have struggled against, particularly in home games. I think that's exactly why they're still looking for another left winger, someone who's strong on the one-on-ones, who they feel can beat a man. That would help that. I think Xavi Simons might help unlock Cole when it's a game where Cole's very, very, very closely shackled, because it creates something else for the other team to think about. I mean, goals is going to be a big thing for Chelsea this season, because after the game, I just had a little look. I like to do my research where I can. Since Leicester won the league, no team has won the Premier League with less than 83 goals. Chelsea got 64 last season. Now, I don't have Chelsea as full on title contenders, and I don't think that should be the expectation at this stage. But they obviously want to progress, and they obviously want to get closer for challenging for the title. That is the main goal to start with. And if they're going to get closer, they're going to probably have to at least score 10 to 15 goals more, if not 20 goals more, which, is going to put a big burden on those front players to actually really produce goals wise. So that is going to be a big thing for them this season. If they are to progress on last season and really push on up the table and mount a title challenge, or get closer to mounting a title challenge, they're going to have to score a lot more goals.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, I think shot conversion and chance creation, kind of the two phrases of the day for me, as you looked at what Chelsea did or did not do against Crystal Palace. Since we last talked, which was before the announcement of Levi Colwill's
Yes.
injury, his ACL injury, there's obviously been a lot of discussion about that injury, what it means for Chelsea's season, if it takes them out from being up there in the title challenge to just being kind of another team in the top six. There's been kind of a public battle between, I use battle loosely, between Maresca and the sporting directors, saying, Maresca wants another center back to replace Colwell. Sporting directors feel like they have what they need. You mentioned Josh looking good on Sunday, despite it being like a high pressure situation and replacing Levi. What do you make of all this right now? Because this is really the kind of conversation starter of the day for most Chelsea fans.
Look, it's a big blow for Chelsea. You can't get away from that. Levi brings so much. It's not just his ball playing ability, it's his character, it's his presence, it's his approach to the game. I think last season there were a couple of moments, not least against Nottingham Forest, where he came up with some really big clutch moments in big situations as well. Levi's certainly one of those who I think could fit into sort of the old Chelsea. You know, he has that character and that way of playing that would fit in with the John Terry and the Frank Lampard days. That I'm not saying he's necessarily good enough yet, although he probably is, but certainly character and the way he approaches the game is very in keeping with that sort of set of players. And I don't think Chelsea have an awful lot of that these days. Cucurella's maybe another one, but um, he does bring something different to the squad, both in terms of attitude and skill set, which is very hard to replicate. I mean, Enzo's biggest sort of worry is clearly that with Levi in the team, it allows you to basically push Cucurella into midfield, and Levi is responsible for sort of acting as that guy who breaks the lines and brings the ball out of defence, and he's very good at it. Hence, you know, he's been even played at left back in the past by Poch and stuff like that. So there's not really anyone else who can do that. Fofana can do it a little bit, but not in the same way. And I think the other big concern, obviously, is if you've got Levi out for the best part of the season, he was the constant in the defence last season because you can't trust Fofana's fitness. So again, you don't want a situation where you're having to rotate your defence around in both positions a lot because, you know, traditionally that doesn't lead to an awful lot of success. You know, the teams that do well tend to have quite a stable partnership, or certainly one very stable person within that partnership. So it's a problem. It's a real problem. I get why Enzo thinks that they need to look outside. I also get why the club would say, look, we've got 6, 7, 8 central defenders here, and you know we rate them all. And what does it do to our squad planning and everything else if we just overlook them and bring someone else in? So there's always push and pull in transfer windows. There's always moments when managers get a little bit pissed off. Enzo pre Palace clearly sent out a message on it. Post Palace was asked again and gave a very moody answer of just kind of, I've made my feelings clear on this. I'm not going to talk about it again. So there's clearly still some push and pull going on. At the moment, Chelsea remain adamant that they want to find the solution from within the squad, and clearly Fofana is close to fitness. You know, he was on the bench at the weekend. No real thought of him getting on the pitch, but he's getting there, and I think they want to. I probably agree with the club that they should probably look from within on this one and alter things accordingly. But I also understand that managers are constantly looking for solutions from outside clubs as well. So it's quite a normal thing. But it could certainly be very important for Chelsea's season. You know.
We got a question from JKT, and I think this does play on kind of what you were just asking, which is the latest on Fafana, and do the clubs still rate him as highly as they did 2 years ago, pre all of these injuries? My point on the Monday pod was that if you're the sporting directors, you have to be pretty damn sure that he and Benoit Badiashile are going to be available at like plus 60% of the games to keep with the current rotation of five center backs. Do you feel like they will be, given what you know today, or are you worried about the availability of some of the of Chelsea's center back rotation?
Well, I'm always worried about Fofana's availability because historically you'd be mad not to be. You know, there's no proof that he's going to be fit for longer than he is out, if that makes sense. So that's a huge worry for me. I mean, he's clearly back. He's clearly going to be playing quite soon, and it's how he can be managed through that. What I would say is they've managed Reece James brilliantly. Reece James, touch wood, and I really hope I don't jinx this, has come through a long time now without a setback, his longest for a while, and looks in very good shape. So they've hopefully got some. I know they're different injuries and they're different people, but hopefully the way they've managed Reece would give some encouragement that they've found a way of managing players with long-term injury problems back. And that might be helpful to Fofana. But I get why I totally get why there are concerns in terms of the rotation. Badiashile's had terrible injury problems. Fofana's had awful injury problems. You need to be, like I said, you need to be able to rely on at least one of your centre backs to be a mainstay if you're going to achieve too much. So I totally get why it's an issue, but I also totally get that they've got a lot of centre backs at that football club. And what are you saying to people if you bring another one in? They definitely rate Fofana really highly still, but they, like everybody, I'm sure there's question marks from within over his fitness. I know for sure that Maresca loves Fofana and thinks that Chelsea are a different team when Fofana plays. But again, he must have his own private doubts on how much he can count on him.
Yeah, I think you're in a situation if you're the sporting directors where that confidence level has to be big. Otherwise, you are putting your team at risk for the season because just having you know three center backs for an entire 4 months until you get to January is a pretty big concern.
It's a difficult position though because they've made certain promises or certain pledges to someone like Josh Achapong, and if you just don't really give him a chance and you bring someone else in, you could find Achapong deciding he wants to leave. I've seen that there's already been criticism of the club for the fact that there's been suggestions Tyreek George wants to leave permanently rather on loan because of them signing wingers. You could get very easily into the same position with Achapong. So when you're talking about squad building and giving young kids a chance, it's a real catch-22 in terms of how you would
Yeah.
manage that situation. It's very difficult.
Yeah, and I mean, you did kind of mention your thoughts on Josh's performance. I thought he looked good, and I guess my point on him and people who are kind of concerned that he's not a Levi Colwill regen, he's a different profile of player. I think he has so much fewer match minutes at the top level than Levi did when he came in and started, that he's going to have to take time to get up to speed and really play at the level that I think people think he can play. I think he's incredibly highly rated as a center back and even as right back cover. But I mean, Levi had 2 full seasons on loan before he came
Yeah, exactly.
back to
I mean,
Chelsea, and so we're not even talking about
Levi
the
had
same thing.
almost broken into the England squad through his Brighton performances. Levi, Liverpool already wanted to sign Levi. I know there's been interest in Josh, but it's a different type of interest because his is all about potential. Look, I think I said it, there was one absolutely brilliant tackle he made either on Mateta or
Yeah.
Sarr. I thought he handled himself very well. I thought he was calm. I thought he was composed. He's not a Levi Colwill regen, but he doesn't need to be. No one's saying he should be a Levi Colwill regen. So let the kid be what he's going to be. But he's clearly very talented, and I know what the reaction would be if they signed a centre back and we suddenly found out that he wants to leave. So
Yep.
that has to be taken into consideration.
Last one on the game from Zach Rest, which is all about what's truly needed here, whether this is an opportunity for Maresca to really coach up or even change the way that his team passes the ball to kind of suit the players that he has in the back line, or if the money is there, why wouldn't you go and try and sign? The latest rumor is Bastoni from Inter Milan. Why wouldn't you go out and sign someone who's a legitimate number one type of profile?
Well, then what do you do when Colwell comes back? What do you do with the defenders who are already there? It's not as simple as that. I mean, saying the money's there, it doesn't make the squad planning and harmony of a football club and stuff like that. I do look. I've said already. I get it from Maresca's point of view. He's about to go into a Champions League campaign. It's going to be a lot more difficult than last season. And that brings its own challenges. I do get a little bit pissed off with coaches, and this isn't a Maresca complaint, it's a coach's complaint. I get a little bit pissed off when coaches kind of, their first point of solution is literally just to buy another player so that they can play the exact same way the whole time. It's like, surely part of coaching is finding solutions within your squad and finding solutions within your playing style. There has to be other ways of doing things. There has to be other ways of looking at things. So it always gets me annoyed a little bit when you hear that, well, the only way to solve this problem is to buy another player so I can play the exact same way. It's like, well, you've been paid an awful lot of money, and there are other ways to play football, and there are other people to do it. So, yeah, I'm on the fence of this. I don't sort of support the club or support the manager in it. I get the push and pull. It's going to be a topic. Depending on how the first months of the season go, we're going to, quickly decide who was right and who was wrong. It's put them in a very difficult position. Let's put it that way. We started this little section on Colwill by saying it's a big blow, and the more I talk about it, the bigger blow I actually think it is.
Yeah, same. All right, well, let's take a quick ad break here. Thanks to sponsors. We'll be back to talk about what is going on in transfer market before we get to a small abbreviated mailbag for Matt. So thanks to sponsors. We'll be right back. All right, Matt, we have news of an extension, but not for any players, for the sporting directors who have signed an extension. Is theirs all the way to 2042, or what kind of terms are we talking about here?
2031.
Yeah.
So they were all contracted till 2028. Obviously, Sam Jewell had come in kind of a year later, but he was on the same contract length as them. They were actually slightly, I don't know whether it's bizarre, quirky. A quirky fact was that of the management staff and the playing staff, they actually had one of the shortest amount of times in their contracts of anyone at the club. I mean, obviously, there's the odd player like Reece and a couple of others. Cucurella hasn't quite extended yet, but basically, they had less time on their contracts than most people at the football club in the football department. So that was a strange quirk. So I think that's part of it. It's interesting because it's a commitment from both sides. I don't think they've been given huge pay rises. I don't think it's about giving them loads of money and slapping them on the back and saying, "You're the best in the world, guys. So we're gonna, give you pots of money to say well done." I think it's more a demonstration of faith from the club, and also a demonstration of faith from them in the club's project that they are carrying out for the club. They want them all to be aligned as well, hence they all signed the contract. It was never going to be the case that Paul Winstanley and Lon Stewart signed extensions and Sam Jewell and Joe Shields didn't. They're very clear that they're all aligned. They work as a foursome. They work as a sporting leadership team, as they call them. It's a recognition of the work they've done since 2023 January, when that team started to be put together, rather than a recognition of the season that's just gone. And it's just about stability and trust and faith and things like that, I think.
Okay. It's, I don't really know what to say about the sporting directors getting extended. I feel
well,
like
I think the interesting thing with the sporting directors and the sporting team is, over the last few years, and some of it's been understandable, they've had an awful lot of stick. They get blamed for, certainly football wise, they get blamed for an awful lot when things don't go well, and you could try and justify some of that, or you could say some of that's harsh. I think the interesting thing, though, is it shows that the faith in them from above has really not particularly wavered, and that they're doubling down on that philosophy. The squad's got younger. The squad was the youngest squad in the Premier League last season, and it's younger again this season. They're really doubling down on it. There's no sort of tweaking or changing going on. It's a real belief in what they do.
Yeah. Chelsea still have a lot of business for these newly minted signed sporting directors to do before the end of the window. We can go down the list here, but of course, Nicolas Jackson, Christopher Nkunku are kind of tops of the list, with Disasi, Vega, Chukwuemeka, Chilwell, Sterling, maybe Ty George, Anselmino, all this sort of stuff. But let's talk about Jackson. And look, Memo, who's part of our Discord, said, given all the rumors, would Matt Law take Nico at Villa? Hit us.
Yes, I would. um, Nico's an interesting one because the market around Nico is narrowed. I think 2 months ago, you might have looked at it, and I looked at it and thought that there's going to be a lot of different opportunities for Nico. I thought because a lot of clubs had shown an interest, there was still a lot up in the air in the transfer striker market. And in the last month or so, that's really narrowed down now, and you really don't have a huge realistic market for Nico. Napoli have a problem because Romelu Lukaku's injured, but they seem to be more inclined to go towards Højlund. I am told that there are likely to be check talks on Jackson because I think the Jackson camp is quite close to Napoli. But at the moment, they look more inclined to pursue Højlund. Whether that changes or not, we'll see. There's other potential Italian avenues. AC Milan want a striker. Juventus still hope to get rid of Vlahovic. That might free up a striker place there, which I've spoken about on the show. Newcastle seem to have gone cold on him. Newcastle would definitely had an interest in him, but seemed to, I think if they were going to sign Nicolas Jackson, they'd have signed him by now. So unless something dramatically changes with Newcastle over the last fortnight, I don't see Newcastle anymore, which leaves the only real option in England being potentially Villa. But that comes with a lot of caveats because Villa have a lot of spending restrictions. There's no way they can do a permanent transfer. So Villa would have to be a loan or a loan with an obligation. A loan with an obligation, I don't really see as being a problem for Chelsea because all you're actually really doing with a loan for obligation is delaying the payment. Chelsea, PSR wise, and everything else aren't in desperate need of immediate cash. So I don't see why that would cause them a problem. They obviously agreed a similar deal when Lewis Hall went to Newcastle, so they're not against the loan with the obligation. Whether they'd be against a dry loan, I doubt whether they'd fancy that at this stage. But if they get to the last few days of the window and, as I say, that the market isn't huge for Nico, then maybe they'll have to look at that. So it's going to be really interesting with Nico how that develops. I still think he will have to go somewhere. I don't think he can be third choice given the way the summer's gone and the fact he's currently not training with the first team squad. I know there's been talk of reintegration, but that's difficult when the lad himself knows he's not going to get a lot of opportunity. So it'll be interesting. I actually think as well Villa could be a good environment for him. You know, Unai Emery's had him before, clearly likes him. He gave him his big breakthrough. Unai Emery has this incredible record at helping strikers going all the way back to his Seville days with Carlos Bacca. Then, at Villa, it's been Ollie Watkins. You saw what he did with Rashford last season, who's now got a move to Barcelona on the back of an encouraging spell at Villa. He does have a knack of really helping strikers kickstart their careers. So, again, it could work to Jackson and Chelsea's benefit were he to go on Villa on some sort of loan.
Give some odds here that Nico stays or goes. Are we talking 50-50? Or are we talking higher that he
I
goes?
I think it's a bit higher than he goes, although, like I said, the market's narrowed. So I would probably say 65 he goes, 35 he stays at the moment. But it's a close run thing. But I do think it'll be a very difficult situation for both player and club were he to stay. Which what makes me wonder whether in the last few days of the window they might have to start considering a loan, which if you'd have said that at the start of the window, I think everybody would have said no way about.
Yeah, I think there's a chance he stays, candidly.
The other thing with Nico, it's really difficult with Nico, and it's not his fault, and it's a tricky one for the club. I think their valuation of Nico at over 60 million, I know you can talk about 80 and 100, but I think realistically it's somewhere over 60 million. I think that is a fair reflection of Nico's value in the market. The two problems you've got is you now don't really have anyone left in the market who can pay that. That's been the biggest problem. But the second problem is that his stats and everything else do value him at around a 60 plus striker, but no third choice striker is worth 60 plus. So his position within Chelsea almost contradicts his stats and his value, because
Yeah.
you just don't get teams paying 60 plus million for a third choice striker who everybody knows is barely going to get any games. So it makes the valuation this summer really difficult, which again is why maybe some sort of structured loan work ends up working better this summer.
Yeah, interesting. What about Christopher Nkunku here, who has kind of been on the bubble all summer? It looks like maybe Bayern Munich are trying to negotiate down, where Chelsea are currently at. Is there anyone else in for Christopher Nkunku, or is it simply just Bayern and Bayern?
No, there are other clubs interested, but Bayern seem to be the one who are pursuing it, and the one that Nkunku obviously favours at the moment. He seems to have agreed everything personally with Bayern. They've had a loan deal rejected. Chelsea are adamant they want a permanent deal. There seems to be some encouragement in Germany that Bayern can still do a permanent deal. They need forwards. They've lost a lot of players. Kingsley Coman's recently gone off to Saudi. They've had the injury with Musiala. They've got quite a thin squad. So I think he will end up at Bayern. If I was predicting, I think Nkunku will end up at Bayern. And clearly, once Nkunku goes, a button will get pressed on either Simons or Garnacho. Once Jackson goes, a button will get pressed on Simons or Garnacho. Literally, those two deals are waiting for something to just proceed with the others.
Oh, I meant to ask you: is there any chance if Jackson goes to Villa that Morgan Rogers would come back to Chelsea at this stage?
Well, look, I was always told earlier in the window, and I said it on this show, that if Villa inquired about Jackson, that would immediately trigger a Chelsea inquiry into Rodgers. So I would be amazed if a conversation on Jackson didn't also result in a conversation on Rodgers. I'd be equally amazed if Villa sold him at this stage of the transfer window. But whether it would help something in future, whether there can be side agreements made for in the future or not, I don't know. The clubs have a very good relationship. You've only got to look down the deals going back to Chuck Wemaker. This ownership has a very good relationship with the Villa ownership. They've done a lot of deals together. So that puts them in a good place, both in terms of Jackson and potentially Rodgers one day on Chelsea.
Any news on Raheem Sterling, a guy who's probably the toughest in the squad to move given his wages?
Yeah, look, a few weeks ago, Chelsea were adamant that they were trying to sell him. I think 20 million was being talked about. That would clearly still be their preference, but the door has opened in the last couple of weeks to a loan move again, and that's probably more realistic at this stage. He himself has got interest from overseas. He wants to stay in the Premier League if possible. Ideally, he'd like to stay in London. Obviously, Fulham have definitely had an interest. They've been chasing a Shakhtar winger, which hasn't really progressed anywhere. So whether that then brings them back to Sterling or whether that was as well as Sterling, we'll see. But he wants to stay in the Premier League. He'd like to stay in London. I don't think it's be all and end all if he stays in London. I think the difference between this summer and last summer is that the way it all unravelled for Raheem at Chelsea on the eve of the season left nobody any time to really think about anything. A loan was rushed to Arsenal that looked great for him in some respects because of the size of club Arsenal were, but actually it was a pretty disastrous loan because he was never going to play much. He was always going to be on the bench, which meant he could never really get anything going at Arsenal. I still think he might be a good pickup for a club. It's only 2 seasons ago he was Chelsea's second top scorer or something with 10, 11 goals and sort of 7 or 8 assists. Clearly he hasn't got a future at Chelsea, but he's only 30. He's on loan. He could still end up being a good pickup for the right club if someone's willing to put some faith in him. So he will get a move. I suspect it's more likely a loan now that door's opened, and we'll see who it ends up being. I think, clearly Chelsea will end up still having to pay some of his wages, though.
Yeah. What about your boy Carnes, who I think there seemed to be some anticipation that a move to Dortmund would get done, and now there seems to be a little bit of Dortmund not recognizing the valuation that Chelsea have put out. I mean, surely it's time to kind of look elsewhere if you're him, right?
He's desperate to go back there. He clearly enjoyed his time there. They've clearly got into his head. He's desperate to go back there. So I don't think he's going to give up on that just yet. They won't meet Chelsea's asking price. They won't go anywhere near Chelsea's asking price. They'd prefer to loan him. It feels like Carney, every summer we hear that Carney can't be loaned, and then ends up getting loaned. So let's see if that happens again or whether there's a permanent deal to be done. There's other interest in Germany. Clearly, Leipzig were interested as well. There's definitely English interest in Carney as well. So again, he will get a move. He wants it to be Dortmund, and I don't think until the very last days of the window he's going to particularly give up on that.
Renato Vega, who kind of has gone through this weird summer where he was wanted by everyone and then wanted by no one for a couple of weeks. Apparently, Villarreal are in the running for him again after a little bit of Saudi interest. What happens with him? Because obviously, the minute that Chelsea have this Levi Colwill injury, you are in a spot where it's like, oh, you could potentially reintegrate Vega. I think his stance last season kind of makes that even more difficult than it would be to
Yeah,
bring Nico back in. It's kind of a weird one.
the problem there is all the indications are being is that Vega doesn't want to be reintegrated. You
Yeah.
know, there's only one way to go from that. Villarreal have had one bid turned down. I think they still hope to do it. I think they're still leading the race from what I'm told. He seems to be quite open to that move. So watch that space on that. I'm told Marseille are also interested in Vega, and two Premier League clubs who I don't know who they are. I suspect at the moment, if you were to ask me, it'd probably be more likely Villarreal, because I'm told that there's definitely encouragement and optimism there. But there seems to be some options. I think I've said on it before, he seems to be highly rated within Europe, Vega, from stuff he's done in his youth career and stuff he's done earlier on in Portugal. So I always think I'm pretty confident Vega will get a move, and Chelsea will probably get 20 to 30 million for him, depending on how a deal's structured, which will be a very decent deal.
That really does only leave, in the list of, sales and
Disasi,
loans. Yeah, Disasi is really the last one on that defender list, it seems.
he has some interest from Italy, I'm told. Whether some late interest comes up in England, we'll wait to see. I don't think the Villa loan ended up doing him too much good reputationally, which is a shame for him because I'm told he's a great guy. I still think as a pure central defender, he's a very adequate pure central defender for a lot of clubs, not who are operating at the top end, but good clubs. But the problem is because he's been played at right back a lot, it's shown up deficiencies that probably are a little bit harsh on him. I think he'll get a move, whether it's a loan or permanent, probably more likely a loan at the moment. But he has some interest in Italy. He's still waiting for things though. But I mean, he's very far out of the picture at Chelsea these days.
I think if Carnes and Disasi are loaned, that's the last two international loan spots potentially. So,
but I mean, Disasi, I think they'd find a loan for Disasi in this country.
Okay.
As well, there's been interest in this country before, so I don't think they need to commit themselves to that.
Yeah.
You've obviously got there's definite loan interest in Anselmino from some big overseas clubs. I'm told that Chelsea haven't quite decided what they definitely want to do on Anselmino yet, so he could go on loan, he could stay. I suspect he'll go on loan, but let's see on that one because Chelsea are adamant that no decision's been made on him yet. Is Datro Fofana still at the club?
I believe so. Yep, he's one of the last ones on the
he's someone
attacking
I
side.
always forget. Yeah, he's always someone I forget. I have no idea what's happening with him.
And then I think it's just Kellyman and Chilwell. I think those are the last.
Chilwell, clearly they want to sort something out for. Very difficult with his wages. Not a big market for left backs. That's a hard one to see what happens there. Kellyman, I suspect with his injuries, they might like to keep around till January to keep a very close eye on his fitness and maybe look at something in January. That's a bit of a guess because I haven't outright asked on him, but there's been so little noise on Kellyman, it makes me think that maybe they see him best to keep him around till January, make sure his fitness is okay before maybe looking at a loan for him. He's been very unfortunate.
And Ty George just depends on who comes in.
Ty George just depends on who comes in and him. I mean, I'm pretty sure he will go. The club would definitely rather loan him than sell him. There's obviously been quite a lot of reports that he now maybe favours a sale. There's a lot of interest in him. He's very highly rated around Europe and around England, so they won't struggle. They certainly won't be letting him go though before they sign a left winger, because currently, as you saw from the bench the other day, he's currently the second choice left winger. We just don't expect that to remain the status quo.
Yeah, so that's only like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
8, 9 players.
Yeah, about there in less than 2 weeks. Did Chelsea get it done, or are they still kind of left with some on the January market?
I think they'll get. I think they'll get the majority, if not all of it, done. I mean, someone like Ty George will depend on what happens incoming a little bit. That's up in the air, and Firmino, like I say, is a little bit up in the air. But the rest, I think, will get done, even if it's really late in the window. Chelsea are really trying hard to have as close to a net zero summer as they can, and if they're going to make these two signings, obviously that's going to then rely quite hard on the outgoings. You know, they'll get good money for Vega. I think they'll get good money for Nkunku. What happens on Jackson is interesting, but I think even if it ends up a loan, it'll end up being sort of guaranteed good money down the line for Jackson. They might not get it immediately because of the way the market shrunk a bit. So they probably will end up quite close to net zero on their ins and outs.
And no other incomings than Garnacho and Simmons at this point?
No, I mean, look, if something were to go horribly wrong on Simmons, they would certainly look elsewhere. And you mentioned Rodgers, and I'm sure that discussion will still be had in the last weeks of the window, but I don't see it. Simmons just seems to be a case of pushing the button when they can push the button, or when they feel it's right to push the button because of outgoings. I haven't heard anything else. Garnacho seems a very similar situation, and at the moment, you have to believe the club on the central defender. The only thing I would say is there's always a caveat when we get to this stage of the window with 2 games left in the window, is clubs can become very reactive.
Yeah.
So if Chelsea all of a sudden lose at West Ham and concede 2 goals in the game after that, then all of a sudden, I'd imagine all bets on centre backs would be off, and we could see some movement there. The clubs become very reactive in terms of performances and results when they've got games to play within a transfer window.
Yep. No, I think that's a fair enough point. Well, let's break there. Obviously, you have our word on Matt Law's season prediction, game by game. Once the transfer market is settled, there's no need to go too crazy about the whole season right now. But I will in the next mailbag section ask you about our final 2 August fixtures, just to get you on the record for that. So let's take
Okay.
a quick break, and we will be back for a rapid fire mailbag. Thanks to sponsors. We'll be right back. All right, Matt. I'm gonna get you on the record.
Go.
Chelsea obviously have started the Premier League season. You did not get your Palace prediction in before the match,
I
which
did
is
not.
really just it's for someone as esteemed as you at
You could
predictions.
have asked me. You've got my number. You could
I
have
know.
easily messaged me and asked for it.
Look, I made a huge error in not contacting you, but 2 London derbies coming up for Chelsea. Friday, August 22nd, coming up in a couple days at West Ham. Chelsea then host Fulham on Saturday, August 30th. What's Chelsea's record going into the international break?
Win-win.
Done. Okay, lovely.
Win-win, and win-win comfortably. 2 comfortable wins.
Wow. Okay, you're feeling it.
Yeah.
See, all right. That Matt Law swagger
I,
is back. There you go.
I don't. I actually think West Ham will end up being okay, but I think this is a great time to play them. They've got an awful lot to do in the transfer window. They've got an awful lot of question marks hanging over them. They've just come off the back of the terrible results, so the home crowd are going to be a little bit antsy and nervous. I can only see one outcome there. And Fulham have done nothing yet in the transfer window. I'd imagine they'll be racing around at the end of it too. So again, I think good time to play Fulham. I think they're 2 great fixtures for Chelsea. And as I say, I can't see anything but 2 comfortable wins.
Okay, I love that. From
Do you agree?
McLeasy,
Do you
I do,
agree?
I do. I think we
Yes,
end on
good.
7 points
Yeah.
before the transfer window closes, and everyone calms down a little bit, which is going to be good. From McLeasy on a rapid fire mailbag here. What is Matt's take on the sudden enforcement of Law 13 free kicks near the wall that disallowed as his goal for Crystal Palace? Is this selective enforcement or a sign that referees are now paying closer attention to details?
Yeah, look, I've got to be honest. I didn't know this law existed because it's never been used before. And nobody around me in the stadium knew what this law was. And we all wondered whether it had been introduced this summer because we hadn't really heard anything about it. And it turns out it's about 6 years old. um, I've got no problem with the goal being disallowed because the law is there and the law has been enforced correctly. So, absolutely no problem with the goal being disallowed. It's just so bizarre that it's never been enforced before. And that's not anything really to do with Sunday's game because it got enforced. It's a law. It should be enforced. Whether you like the law or not doesn't really matter. I don't understand why it's never been enforced before because there are clear examples where it could have been enforced.
And I don't know if you picked this up in future free kicks. The referee, I think it was Darren England, who's the referee of the game, was making the 1 meter vertical mark
Yes.
as well as
Yes. And I've
the.
not seen that before, unless
I haven't either.
have I just never noticed this or have they? Yeah. The whole
Uh,
thing was a little bit odd because it looked like something they had had some sort of decision made in the summer, the way it came from nowhere. And yet it should have been like this for the last 6 years, it turns out. So that's my only confusion with it. The
yeah.
law itself, I've got no problem with particularly, and it was enforced correctly. It shouldn't have been a goal, but I had no idea about it. And like virtually everybody else watching the game, for at least a good 2 minutes, I assumed the goal had been disallowed for some sort of pushing.
I want your take on this because my take is that the introduction of the announcement to the stadium after a VAR decision makes terrible VAR decisions harder to see happening. And I say this because I think it's really easy to put up a graphic on a screen in the side of the stadium and go VAR decision, blah blah blah. I think it's a lot harder to then send your referee back out there like a lamb to slaughter to go announce to a home crowd of 50,000 people or whatever that a terrible call has been made. Do you agree? And do you like the in stadium announcement?
Um, I like the in stadium announcement because I like anything that's designed to keep the people inside the stadium part of the game as much as possible. Because one of my
Right.
big problems with VAR and technology has been everything around it has felt like it's almost alienated the people in the stadium, and people who are watching on telly get more information, and that's felt unfair. So from that perspective, I like it. It's a really good point, and we haven't seen it yet when a referee is going to have to, in a home stadium, tell the fans something they really don't want to hear. Because obviously, he told the Chelsea fans something they really wanted to hear last night. Similarly, last night's penalty, Leeds versus Everton, I can't remember whether there was an announcement, but there wouldn't have been any problem with Ellen Road giving that penalty. But switch those decisions around and you're giving them against the crowd, we could see some pretty hefty booing and abuse going on. You're right, it'd be difficult. Although it was quite hard to make out exactly what he was saying in the stadium. I've got to be honest. I didn't really, until I saw it. I follow the account where they always tweet what the decision is, the Premier League account, and it wasn't really until that came through and they actually used his quote that I was properly aware of what he said because it's quite difficult to hear what was said. It wasn't very clear. We'll see. We'll see. I mean, I referees, VAR, PSR, SCR, fuck it all, quite frankly. Sick of talking about all of it.
Yeah, look, got on the bad list there. There you go. From Moon Runner, how many academy debuts do
It's a really good question. Yeah,
both of us think will happen this year? I think three.
debuts because like some of those kids who you think might play again in the Carabao Cup have obviously already made their debuts.
Mhm.
I, I'm going to go one because I
One.
just think,
Okay.
but that's linked to the fact that I think some of those lads who got some minutes last season and still extremely young will potentially get some more minutes, and maybe there'll be one other. Three is bold, but maybe you probably know more of it than me. It's a really good. I like the question, and I'm now going to keep a lookout and look carefully at where and when any academy debuts come. I really like the question. I might even end up writing a piece around it. So thanks to who was that again?
Moon Runner. There you go.
Moon Runner. You've given me an idea for a piece. Thank you very much.
There you go. That's a high bit of praise. From MJ Pennington, news on front of shirt sponsor rumors. There have been some kind of bubbling up lately.
Yeah, look, there's nothing I can really say that I haven't already said on this. I am told with great confidence that there will be a front of shirt sponsor this season, that it will be a long-term sponsor. It won't be a makeshift sponsor like they've had in the past. Um, I think the number of companies has come down a little bit in terms of who they're in serious talks with. I think a lot of those speculated are probably in the right ballpark, but I don't have any firm news, I'm afraid.
Okay. So you're committing to Qatar Airlines as the front of shirt sponsor. It sounds like excellent. From Millhouse, and I think this is a really good question. I'm not sure if you have the answer on the top of your head, or if we need to think about it for next week's show. But can you describe how we've heard a lot about a fee plus add-ons to make up
Yes.
the difference for what negotiations are? Can you just give us a little bit of description for how add-ons get booked? Do they come in as pure profit? Do they get backdated to the year the player was sold? Do they get put on the accounts for the year that the add-ons are actually paid?
Great question. I'm going to double check this. I will give you
Okay.
my, I think it's an educated guess, but I will double check this for you and come back to you on another show when I can get you a definitive. I'm pretty sure they backdate to the deal. So they don't, if a player is sold now, it will impact, even with the add-ons, whenever those add-ons they will just get backdated to when the deal was. I don't think it helps the accounting, say in 3 or 4 years' time, but I'm not totally sure on that.
That's interesting because let's pretend that Chelsea were in trouble this summer from a PSR perspective, which they are not. But they had a couple of deals like Joao Felix to Al Nasser, which puts you know add-ons squarely into play to get to the valuation that they wanted to reach. Would they then in a couple of years be able to go back and say, actually, we're good to go? Or how
Yeah,
that's
you've actually made me doubt my educated guess now. I think I'm just going to have to take a check on this
okay.
to come back, because you're right. That leaves quite a large question mark over that. So I'm going to double back on myself and redact my educated guess, and I will find out for you. You can set me that challenge. I'm going to find out, and I will give you a definitive in my next appearance. That can be my challenge.
All right, we have from our friend Essie and Stan, Matt. Would you rather the following players be forced to start every single
Oh
game for
God.
Villa, and it's a pick one of three option?
Okay.
Would you rather that Axel Disasi, Raheem Sterling, or David Datro Fafana be forced to start every single game for Villa this season?
Sterling, Sterling, because
Wow. Okay.
we've got a gap on the left side. I mean, going back to Nico Jackson, actually, if Nico were to come to Villa, it'd be interesting where he would be played, because I would say Villa's big gap is on the left side. So we have a gap on the left side. We lack some pace. I know Sterling might not be as fast as he was, but I think he's faster than a lot of our players. We do lack some pace. And as I said, I still think he could be a smart pickup for someone, because I still think he could get 7 to 8 goals playing regularly from a left wing position, which isn't bad. I know it's not what Chelsea want. So I actually think, we're well set in the centre of defence when everybody's fit. I'm never playing Datro Fofana over Ollie Watkins in my entire lifetime. So it's actually ended up quite an easy question, thank you. So yeah, Raheem Sterling.
All right, we got to make this harder
As long
next
as he
time.
doesn't take free kicks.
Yep. Yeah. That's fair. All right, last one, and I think this is kind of a funny one to end on. Siddharth asks if we lose to Harry Potter on Friday, Graham Potter, obviously, is it time to focus on the 2026-2027 season instead of this season? Go.
Yeah, season over. If they lose the second game of the season, it's season over. Forget it. Look, A, they won't lose, and B, no, that would be nonsense. You know, a lot can still be achieved after some dodgy opening results, but I don't foresee it coming. But even if it does, or even if they draw, I'm sure there'll be a lot of doom and gloom if they were to draw and have another clunky performance. Look, that they'll get into their stride. I think it's going to take them. I think, to be honest, what I think for the whole league, I always think these first 3 games, sometimes it's 2 games, sometimes it's 3 games before the transfer window shuts, is a bit of an extended preseason. It's a bit weird. Nobody's got their squads tied down. Nobody's fully fit. It's always a bit odd. And I always think the season actually really properly starts after that first international break when the transfer window's shut. There's no excuses for not really being ready for it. I always think these first 3 games are weird. That being said, I'm very confident Chelsea will win the next 2 games.
Yeah, I would add into that assessment that because this is a World Cup year, you're going to have 3 straight months of international breaks to start the season. It's going to be super, super choppy in
Yeah.
terms of teams like finding a rhythm. And I think you might not be able to separate, the wheat from the chaff, if you will, until December,
Oh,
January
even
time.
past that.
Yeah,
Even past that, because as well, you're going to have the elongated European campaigns. I mean, they run into January and things. So it might even get to February, March time where you've still got a few strange league positions that then sort themselves out a little bit. I agree with you. It's going to be an odd start to the season, and it may not settle down apart from maybe the sort of top 2 or 3 till later on, and hopefully for Chelsea's sake that they're part of the top 2 or 3.
gotta find 20 more goals this season to be in
20 more
contention.
goals. That's my that is the big. If I was to say the biggest challenge for Chelsea this season, if they're going to make significant progress, it's finding 15 to 20 goals at least is
At
the
least.
thing that's going to be the thing, because goals against, if you look at it against all their rivals, wasn't really a problem last season in terms of what they conceded. But they've got to find goals. They've got to find more goals.
Yeah, and that is where we will end this one. So, Matt, thank you for sticking through some technical difficulties and three recordings to get this one done. Chelsea fans appreciate all the questions from our Discord as well. Look into that if you are interested in getting involved. And look, Matt, we'll be back next week to talk through everything that happened at the weekend and into the future. So, yeah,
Good.
we'll see you. We'll see you in a few short days. How about that?
See you next week.
All right. Chelsea fans, that's it for this one. Thanks for suffering through my sunglasses. And until next time, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.